Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, June 2nd, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today: Ukraine hits Russian airfields in major drone attack. So the Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, that's one of their intelligence services, conducted a large-scale drone attack deep inside Russian territory on Sunday that targeted several Russian airfields. The Russian Defense Ministry said the attack targeted 5 Russian regions, including the Amur Oblast in Russia's far east. I mean, this is about almost as east as you can get in Russia, which is over 3,000 miles from the Ukrainian border. And they also hit a base in the Irkutsk Oblast, which is over 2,500 miles from the Ukrainian border. So these attacks were very, very deep inside Russia. This is a very big deal, what happened here. And the attack also targeted the northern region of Murmansk and the western oblasts of Ivanovo and Ryazan. And the Russian Defense Ministry said that several aircraft caught fire in Murmansk and Irkutsk, and that the attacks were launched in the exact proximity of the airfields in the region. The Defense Ministry said that the attacks were repelled in the other 3 regions. A Ukrainian official told Reuters that the SBU was able to pull off the attack by hiding explosive-laden drones inside the roofs of wooden sheds, and the sheds were loaded onto trucks driven near the bases, and the roof panels were lifted off by a remotely activated mechanism allowing the drones to fly out. And we saw videos and pictures of drones flying out of these trucks. So it's really sophisticated operation that they pulled off here, inside Russia. This was all launched from inside Russia, planned and carried out from inside Russia. And Ukrainian officials said that the attack was planned for more than a year, and they're saying that it destroyed 41 Russian aircraft, including Tu-95 long-range bombers, also Tu-22. So this is, an attack on Russia's strategic bombers, a part of their nuclear triad. Again, this is a very, very serious attack. And so Ukraine's saying they destroyed 41 aircraft. Russia hasn't confirmed that. They seem to be downplaying it, saying only several aircraft were hit. But, whatever exactly happened, this was definitely a real hit on these Russian airfields, and not something anyone thought Ukraine would really be able to pull off. Zelensky described the attack as a brilliant operation in his nightly address. He said, quote, "It took place on enemy territory and was aimed exclusively at military targets, specifically the equipment used in strikes against Ukraine. Russia suffered truly significant losses, entirely justified and deserved," end quote. Russia also said that there was no casualties in the attack. So U.S. and Ukrainian officials claimed that the Trump administration was not notified ahead of the attack. For me, that's hard to believe, because we know that the CIA is deeply involved with the SBU and helped build up Ukraine's intelligence agencies after 2014, after the 2014 coup that ousted the former president, Viktor Yanukovych. And there was reporting in the New York Times about this, how the CIA built up these secret outposts in eastern Ukraine. There's also a report from the Washington Post about how the CIA funded the security service, the SBU, and also the GUR, the Ukrainian Military Intelligence. And essentially that report was like explaining that it was the CIA support that developed these intelligence agencies into what they are today, into the intel agencies that are able to carry out attacks inside Russia, carry out assassinations and sabotage attacks. So the idea that the U.S. didn't know about this, I find very hard to believe. So also on Monday, a Russian missile strike on a Ukrainian military training site killed 12 Ukrainian troops and wounded 60. Sorry, I said also on Monday. I got to fix that. That's on Sunday. But Russia launched very heavy attacks on Ukraine. The Ukrainians said that 472 drones were fired at Ukraine, and that's the highest that they've recorded. And so this huge attack inside Russia, comes ahead of the next round of direct talks between Russia and Ukraine, which is supposed to begin on Monday. And again, I find it hard to believe that the U.S. is not involved in this. We've seen signs from, obviously from all the hawks in Congress saying that more pressure should be put on Russia. We've seen Trump hinting at some things, saying, if it wasn't for me, very bad things would happen to Russia. Putin's playing with fire. And then we see something like this happen. And again, it's no secret that the U.S. helped build up these intel agencies and everything like that. So the risk here, how is Russia going to respond? We don't know yet. It could be very big. All right, so the next one here, 2 bridges collapse in Russian border regions, killing 7. So another thing, this happened late Saturday night and early Sunday morning. 2 bridges collapsed in Russian regions that border Ukraine, including one that landed on a passenger train in the Bryansk Oblast, killing 7 people and wounding dozens more. Local rail authorities in Bryansk said the derailment was caused by illegal interference, and Bryansk's governor said that it was an explosion, saying that the bridge had blown up. So in the Kursk Oblast, a bridge collapsed while a freight train was passing over it, and Kursk's acting governor said that part of the train fell into the road under the bridge, injuring one of the train drivers. So this picture here is the aftermath of the collapse in Bryansk, the passenger train. So again, 7 people killed and dozens wounded. So Russian authorities are investigating the 2 incidents, and they have not made any official accusation. But we've seen some officials, like a Russian senator, for instance, here blamed it on Ukraine. The senator said, quote, "The bridge blow up and passenger train derailment in the Bryansk region show that Ukraine is governed by a group of terrorists. We should respond by establishing a buffer zone large enough to prevent any terrorist infiltration into our country further down the road. And the land that is still called Ukraine should be completely denazified and demilitarized, with the state being reset," end quote. This is Senator Andrei Klishach. So, and I think that is the attitude of a lot of Russian hawks, I guess you would call them, is that they want Russia to go further into Ukraine. They want to capture now, territory in northern Ukraine in response to these attacks on Russian territory. And so again, with this, we don't know. Russia hasn't made any official accusations, but the fact that this happened the same day as the drone attacks, and 2 different bridges collapsed, and they happened to collapse while trains were either on them or under them, certainly seems like it was likely sabotage. And the SBU and Ukrainian intelligence has also been conducting sabotage attacks against infrastructure inside Russia. All right, so the next one here. So in the last show I did, I tried to be a little hopeful and positive about the potential with the ceasefire, the Gaza ceasefire negotiations. But that appeared to be foolish. So the next story here, Witkoff says Hamas's response is unacceptable. So U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff has rejected Hamas's response to a U.S.-Israeli Gaza ceasefire proposal, calling it totally unacceptable. Hamas responded to the 13-point proposal by offering amendments, including a guarantee for a permanent ceasefire, a change to the timeline on the release of Israeli captives, and reinserted language that said Hamas would cede power to an independent Palestinian committee. Witkoff wrote on X on Saturday, quote, "I received the Hamas response to the United States' proposal. It is totally unacceptable and only takes us backward. Hamas should accept the framework proposal we put forward as the basis for proximity talks, which we can begin immediately this coming week," end quote. So Bassem Naim, a senior Hamas official based in Turkey, rejected Witkoff's characterization, saying that Hamas had agreed to an earlier U.S. proposal that was then changed by Israel. So Naim told Dropsite News, quote, "We did not reject Mr. Witkoff's proposal. We agreed with him on a proposal, which he deemed acceptable for negotiation. We then received the other party's response through Mr. Witkoff, which rejected all that we had agreed upon with him, end quote. So under the Israeli proposal that Hamas received, the Palestinian group would release 10 Israeli captives and the body of 18 Israelis within the first week of the 60-day truce. So all of the hostages that are going to be released under the Israeli proposal would be released in just the first 7 days. And Hamas wanted a stronger guarantee that the 60-day truce would actually hold. So one of the things that they responded with was the timeline, basically releasing them throughout the 60 days and finishing it on the 60th day. Because they do have good reason not to trust that Israel will uphold the whole ceasefire, after they get all the people out. So a Palestinian official familiar with the negotiations told Middle East Eye, quote, Witkoff's insistence on releasing all the captives in the first week shows ill intention. Based on previous experience, the Israelis will simply return to full-scale war and sabotage the rest of the agreement, end quote. Since Hamas's main demand has been a permanent ceasefire and full Israeli withdrawal, its proposal included stronger language to that end. It said that on the first day of the ceasefire, indirect negotiations will begin under the auspices of the mediators guaranteeing the permanent ceasefire. And that wording, it was different in the Israeli proposal. It was much less strong. And then, so this is interesting regarding long-term plans for Gaza. The Hamas proposal says that an independent technocratic committee will immediately assume management of all affairs of the Gaza Strip upon the start of the agreement's implementation with full authority and responsibilities, meaning that Hamas would no longer be the governing power in Gaza, although the group would remain armed. They haven't made any commitment to disarming. But it's interesting that this was apparently in the original thing that Hamas agreed to with Witkoff, and then it was sent to the Israelis, and they removed this part, Hamas ceding power to this committee. So anyway, the Palestinian source speaking to Middle East Eye said that Hamas feels betrayed by Witkoff since he did not uphold previous agreements. The source said, quote, first, when Israel violated the U.S. guaranteed deal on March 2nd by imposing an embargo on aid and then resuming full-scale war on March 18th with the full support and cover of Witkoff and the U.S. administration. And second, when Hamas released an American-Israeli soldier, Edon Alexander, in good faith, expecting humanitarian relief and a shift in the negotiating approach, which clearly did not happen, end quote. So Hamas has said that it's ready to continue indirect negotiations with Israel to reach a deal. And in the meantime, the U.S. continues to fully back Israel's genocidal assault on the Gaza Strip. And the next story here, Israel kills 32 starving Palestinians in latest U.S. aid point massacre. So this article is from Middle East Eye. Israeli forces have committed a new massacre targeting Palestinian aid seekers in the Gaza Strip, killing at least 32 people and wounding scores more, the Palestinian Health Ministry said on Sunday. According to eyewitnesses and local officials, Israeli troops opened fire directly on civilians gathered at 2 U.S. Israeli food distribution points in Rafah and central Gaza. At least 32 people were killed in Rafah and 1 in central Gaza, while over 200 were wounded, many of them critically. The health ministry accused Israel of using the aid mechanism as a trap for mass killings and a tool for the forced displacement of Gaza's population. It added that those killed in the massacre had single gunshot wounds to the head or chest, indicating clear intent to kill. In Rafah, thousands were instructed to wait some 500 meters from the U.S. distribution point at the Al-Alam roundabout, local journalist Mohammed Gharib told Middle East Eye. As crowds approached the area, Israeli forces rained down bullets on them from every direction, eyewitnesses said. An eyewitness said, quote, I was standing among the crowd, but when people started rushing towards the distribution point, I couldn't move with them because there were hundreds pushing forward. Then a quadcopter appeared and began firing at them. After that, the Israeli army opened fire directly on the crowd, and American security forces fired tear gas canisters. Dozens were killed and injured as people ran in every direction trying to escape, end quote. And this happened very early in the morning. I believe some reports said it was about 3 a.m. And Israel's denying this. They're saying that it didn't happen. But at the same time, there's contradictions in their denials. Like in some stories you see it, an Israeli military spokesman acknowledged that they fired at the, at first they said, we didn't fire. But then you see some reports say that they did acknowledge that they fired toward what they called suspects in the crowd, but claimed that they didn't hit anybody. So their story doesn't really add up. And then Israel also released some footage of what appeared to show a Palestinian gunman shooting at someone, and there was like some aid involved. And then from how I understand it, this was a separate incident that happened in Khan Yunis. And Hamas is saying, that these are the armed gangs that looted aid and they were trying to sell it, and they shot someone who was trying to get the aid. I don't know exactly what the story is there, but it was a completely separate incident. And there's all these eyewitnesses, the doctors and medics, medics that arrived to the scene, and then doctors at hospitals corroborating the story from the Palestinians and all sorts of media outlets, but the Israelis are trying to deny it. And I saw at least some video of the crowd, during when they were being fired at, running, people running for cover, and there were people that were injured and killed in those videos. So just absolutely horrific, and the slaughter, continued throughout the whole weekend. So the next one here, aid ship aiming to break Israel's siege of Gaza sets sail from Italy. So this article is from Al-Jazeera. So international nonprofit organization Freedom Flotilla Coalition says one of its vessels has left Sicily to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza after a previous attempt failed due to a drone attack on a different ship in the Mediterranean. The 12-person crew, which includes Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, Irish actor Liam Cunningham, I think he's one of the guys from Game of Thrones, and Franco-Palestinian MEP Rima Hassan set sail on the Madeleine from the port of Catania on Sunday, carrying barrels of relief supplies that the group called limited amounts of aid, though they're saying it's symbolic. So the voyage comes after another vessel operated by the group, the Conscience, was hit by 2 drones just outside Maltese territorial waters in early May. And they said Israel was to blame for the incident, and Israel has not responded to requests for comment about that. So Israeli drones hit one of their boats off of Malta, which, that's in Europe. And it's very far from Israel. So this is, we're seeing all these pro-Israel people saying, oh, it'd be a shame. I hope Greta knows how to swim. I think Lindsey Graham actually said that, a U.S. senator, basically saying, they should be expected to be blown out of the water. And, it wouldn't be surprising if Israel attacks them, when they're headed for Gaza. And, there was another flotilla. It was back in 2010, and, Israel attacked it and killed about 10 people. I believe it was 2010 or 2011. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a similar thing here with this aid ship that's headed to Gaza. All right, so the next one here, Dr. Hamdi Al-Najjar dies after airstrike that killed his 9 children. So this article is from the Palestine Chronicles. This is just such a sad story. Dr. Hamdi Al-Najjar has died from injuries sustained in the Israeli airstrike that killed his 9 children in Khan Yunis as military operations intensify across southern Gaza. So the Nasser Medical Complex confirmed on Saturday evening the death of Dr. Hamdi Al-Najjar, who succumbed to injuries days after. So if you remember this story, his wife is also a doctor, was working at the hospital when 9 out of 10 of her children were massacred by an Israeli airstrike. And her husband was in critical condition. Well, unfortunately now he has died too. So Dr. Allah, the wife, she is just her and one of her sons now, who I believe is about 11 or 12 years old. And the age range here was a baby. The youngest was a baby, under 1 year old. And the oldest was 12. So just absolutely horrific. All right, so the next one here. Israeli defense minister says we will build a Jewish state in the West Bank. So Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz declared on Friday that Israel would build a Jewish Israeli state in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Katz's comments came a day after the Israeli government approved 22 additional West Bank settlements, which are illegal under international law, and the approval marked the biggest single settlement expansion in more than 30 years, according to the Israeli settlement watchdog Peace Now. So Katz said that the settlement expansion was a response to French President Emmanuel Macron and other world leaders who have been considering recognizing a Palestinian state. So Katz said, quote, "This is a decisive response to the terrorist organizations that are trying to harm and weaken our hold on this land. And it is also a clear message to Macron and his associates. They will recognize a Palestinian state on paper, but we will build the Jewish-Israeli state here on the ground. The paper will be thrown into the trash bin of history, and the state of Israel will flourish and prosper," end quote. So now that, they've really gone to just openly saying that the purpose of the settlements, the purpose of expanding them, is to prevent the creation of a Palestinian state. That's what Katz and Smotrich said in a statement on the settlement expansion. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 2 in weekend strikes on southern Lebanon. So Israel continued to carry out shelling and drone strikes against southern Lebanon, killing at least 2 people and wounding one other, according to various reports. This article is by Jason, by the way. So as usual, the IDF claimed that everyone killed was a top Hezbollah figure. That is always the Israeli claim here. So again, there's strikes on Saturday that killed 1 person, and then strikes on Sunday that killed someone riding a motorcycle in the south between 2 southern villages. And neither of the 2 have been identified by either Lebanon or Lebanese media. It's just Israel's claim that they were Hezbollah. But the daily Israeli strikes in Lebanon continue. All right, the next one here, ISIS attacks Kurdish patrol in Syria, killing 3. So another one from Jason. At least 3 members of the Kurdish Asayish security forces were killed on Sunday in northeastern Syria, according to the group. They said they were targeted by an ISIS cell during a patrol on the road between Raqqa and Hasaka. The patrol was targeted with a landmine, according to some sources. The official statement from this Kurdish group also reported 1 person wounded in the attack who is still receiving medical treatment. ISIS has been launching an escalating number of attacks against northeast Syria, mostly targeting the Kurdish SDF and other Kurdish forces. It has been reported that they carried out 104 attacks so far in 2025. So the SDF reported that late last week they captured an ISIS cell in Deir ez-Zor in eastern Syria. And ISIS claimed 2 attacks in the past 2 weeks targeting Syrian government forces, which are being presented as the first ISIS attacks against the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham government since they took power in December. ISIS said that the first attack was in the Suwaida governorate and that it killed or wounded 7 soldiers. The second attack was near the first one, but a week later, and targeted the U.S.-backed Free Syrian Army, killing 1 and wounding 3. So ISIS is still active here, and this area in eastern Syria, where the Kurds are, this is where U.S. troops are stationed. There's still U.S. bases in this part of Syria. All right, so the next one here, Syria and Israel share common enemies. So this article is from The Cradle. So Syria's self-appointed interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, declared in an interview with the Jewish Journal that Israel and Syria share common enemies and said he is ready to engage with Tel Aviv if there is a clear path to coexistence. He said, quote, "The era of endless tit-for-tat bombings must end. No nation prospers when its skies are filled with fear. The reality is we have common enemies and we can play a major role in regional security. Peace must be earned through mutual respect, not fear. We will engage there where there is honesty and a clear path to coexistence and walk away from anything less," end quote. And of course, this is, Sharaa, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who's the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, fought against the U.S. in Iraq for Al-Qaeda. And this really goes to show what the whole regime change, why the U.S. supported it. When he says common enemies, he's talking about Iran and the Shiites, basically, who are enemies of Al-Qaeda. And it's just the fact that Israel would prefer these guys, even though Israel has been bombing and invading Syria, they would still prefer these guys over Iran, over an Iranian ally, specifically with Syria. Syria is a place for weapons to go from Iran through Syria to Lebanon. That was a big part of it. But It goes to show, just seeing this guy say, we got common enemies with Israel. So he's being very deferential toward the Israelis, which is what the U.S. wants, part of the conditions for the U.S. to lift sanctions. All right, so the next one here, Hegseth says the U.S. is ready to fight a war with China. So this Hegseth gave a really crazy speech about China over the weekend. So the Chinese Foreign Ministry on Sunday slammed U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth for a Cold War mentality in response to his remarks about China at the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, which included him warning that the U.S. is ready to fight and win a war over Taiwan. So during his speech on Saturday, Hegseth took aim at China over a range of issues, including Taiwan and the South China Sea. He said, quote, China seeks to become a hegemonic power in Asia. No doubt it hopes to dominate and control too many parts of this vibrant and vital region, end quote. Hegseth also accused China of wanting to fundamentally alter the region's status quo and said that Beijing's behavior has been a wake-up call, for the world. And again, this is in Singapore. This is in Southeast Asia. Hegseth goes over there and starts saying all this stuff about China. And regarding Taiwan, Hegseth claimed that it was public that Chinese President Xi Jinping had ordered his forces to be prepared for an invasion by 2027. It's not public. This is just a claim from U.S. officials, and it's just based on U.S. intelligence or again, just kind of the claims of U.S. military officials. And it's never been confirmed by China. And apparently there's a report from Defense News that I linked to here that says in 2023, when Xi Jinping met with President Biden, one of the things he brought up was, why is everybody saying we're going to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027? Like, this is not something, there's no plans like that. And China's not hiding that they're building up their military, that they're preparing for some kind of fight. But this specific year, really what I think the point of that claim is because the Pentagon has been looking for more money from Congress to fund this military buildup in Asia. And they've been getting it because they're making all these claims about China invading by 2027. So anyway, and Hegseth has prioritized China. According to a Washington Post report from March, he sent out a memo that ordered the Pentagon to put its focus on preparing for a war with China over Taiwan, despite the obvious risk of nuclear war. And in his speech on Saturday, Hegseth said the U.S. was reorienting toward deterring aggression by communist China. That's how he was referring to China, as communist China, not using the People's Republic of China, the PRC, which is like the official name that U.S. government officials usually use, making it sound very Cold War-like. And he was also, so while he's pushing the claim that China could invade by 2027, he also suggested that it could happen sooner. He said, quote, any attempt by communist China to conquer Taiwan by force would result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent. We hope not, but it certainly could be, end quote. And so this is a very significant escalation in the rhetoric from the U.S., from the Secretary of Defense, saying an invasion could be imminent. And listen to what else he says here. So Hegseth also said the U.S. would focus on deterring a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, although recent U.S. efforts to increase support for Taipei have only raised tensions in the region and led to an increase in Chinese military activity. And that goes for the U.S. increased support, both military and diplomatic support for Taiwan, and also the increased, of U.S. military activity in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, and in these sensitive areas. China's responded by, increasing their military and exercises and everything. So this is just the cycle, when countries get engaged in this sort of thing. And so they're doing it in the name of deterrence, but it's making war more likely. And I think that's very clear. And then this is what he says. He says, quote, if deterrence fails and if called upon by my commander-in-chief, we are prepared to do what the Defense Department does best, fight and win decisively, end quote. So the U.S. Secretary of Defense in Singapore saying we're ready to fight a war with China if they invade Taiwan. Very provocative. And now, U.S. military officials have been openly preparing for war with China, like talking about it. Like, yeah, we're going to be ready. The Navy put out a plan last year to be ready for war by 2027. But this is the Secretary of Defense, and I was looking, like, Lloyd Austin was a serious China hawk. And I was looking at his speech at the same Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore last year. And compared to, Hegseth takes it to a whole nother level. The Biden administration, they were very hawkish and continued the buildups around China. And some of the things Biden said were totally out there. Saying that the U.S. would commit to going to war over Taiwan. Biden said that multiple times. But also, Austin would kind of dress things up and not refer to China directly. Here's Hegseth saying, communist China, they're doing all this great, we're going to get them. So obviously China's not happy about this. So this is what the Chinese Foreign Ministry said in response, quote, Hegseth deliberately ignored the call for peace and development by countries in the region and instead touted the Cold War mentality for bloc confrontation, vilified China with defamatory allegations, and falsely called China a threat. The remarks were filled with provocations and intended to sow discord. No country in the world deserves to be called a hegemonic power other than the U.S. itself, who is also the primary factor undermining the peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific, end quote. Regarding Taiwan, the ministry said that the U.S. was playing with fire on the issue. It said, quote, the Taiwan question is entirely China's internal affair. No country is in a position to interfere. The U.S. should never imagine it could use the Taiwan question as leverage against China, end quote. China's been warning the U.S. very strongly against this increase in support for Taiwan. And we just recently learned, according to a retired U.S. admiral, that there's 500 U.S. troops in Taiwan now. All right, so the next one here, Trump says Iran deal will allow the U.S. to blow up anything. So this article is by Will Porter. He wrote this up over the weekend. This is something that Trump said last week. And essentially, he said similar things before, but he's saying that he wants a deal where the U.S. can go in with inspectors and can take whatever it wants. I'll just read it, the quote, because it's, very Trumpian. He said, quote, I want it to be very strong where we can go in with inspectors. We can take whatever we want. We can blow up whatever we want, but with nobody getting killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody is going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up, end quote. So he's basically saying we could sign a deal where we go in and pick which Iranian nuclear facilities we could blow up, or we bomb Iran. And obviously any kind of deal like that is just, that's really what Trump's asking for, a deal where the U.S. can go in and blow facilities up. That's just not going to happen. All right, so the next one here, the White House taps Palantir for database of Americans. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So in a move raising red flags with civil rights organizations, the Trump administration is working with tech firm Palantir to develop a database for numerous government agencies to collect and store information on all Americans. According to a New York Times report published on Friday, a key Palantir product known as Foundry has been used by at least 4 U.S. federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and Health and Human Services. The firm is now speaking with other cabinet-level agencies. The widespread use of Foundry across the federal government will allow a number of agencies to access hundreds of data points on citizens and others through government databases, including their bank account numbers, the amount of their student debt, their medical claims, and any disability status. The program has caused concern among civil rights groups and former Palantir employees. So this is very concerning. Basically a database using every, whatever kind of data they have on you, compiling it into like a master list of Americans. It's not good. And Palantir is one of these companies. This is Peter Thiel's company. What's the CEO's name? Alex Karp. They are helping Israel, very involved in the genocide in Gaza. Karp was asked at an event. Well, he wasn't asked, but a protester was there saying that, they're helping kill Palestinians. And his answer was not, no, we're not helping them kill Palestinians. His answer was, yes, but they're terrorists. So it was actually acknowledgement that their support is actually, yes, helping kill people in Gaza. So this is the company that Trump, they're very close here. J.D. Vance has connections with Thiel. A lot of these people you see in the administration. So very concerning dystopian stuff here. All right, so the last one. This came out a few hours ago. I guess it's been out for a while now, but there was an attack in Boulder, Colorado that appears to be related to Gaza. So this article is just from CBS News. So a suspect is in custody after what the FBI is calling a targeted act of violence at Pearl Street Mall in Boulder, Colorado on Sunday. Witnesses said the suspect used a makeshift flamethrower and threw Molotov cocktails that burned multiple victims during a march in support of Israeli hostages, according to an FBI official, and 6 people were injured. The suspect was identified as 45-year-old Mohammed Sabri Solomon, FBI special agent in charge, said Sunday evening. So he was allegedly heard yelling "Free Palestine" during the attack. And I did see a video that supposedly was the aftermath, and it showed this guy yelling, and he said something about Palestine and whatever. So this is an attack on people that were like marching and doing some kind of march that they do regularly for the Israeli hostages in Gaza. And this guy apparently attacked him with some kind of flamethrower or Molotov cocktail. So looks like this, this is another consequence of helping Israel slaughter so many people in Gaza, is the blowback that we're seeing on American soil. And it doesn't justify these attacks. Of course, this is an act of terror against innocent civilians, but it is a reality of what we're supporting overseas, the atrocities that the U.S. government is helping commit. And I'm sorry, all these stupid ads on the CBS website. I really should use an ad blocker. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from Rabah Falali, Riyadh and Khartoum heading toward a deal that will anger Cairo. One from Ted Snyder, could a deal with Iran really be on the horizon? One from Ian Proud, the 2026 bill for the Ukraine war is already in the mail. One from Connor O'Keefe, why ending the war in Ukraine is so difficult now. And our spotlight is from Kelly Vlahos, an Israeli attack on Iran would be a blunder. So please go check all that out. That's everything. That was a lot of stuff that we went over today. Hopefully the response, from Russia over this Ukraine thing. I mean, this is stuff that risks the escalation into an open conflict between Russia and NATO. Attacks on Russian strategic bombers as deep inside of Russia as you can get. So we'll see what happens next here. But anyway, I hope everyone had a good weekend. You could always support the show by liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing it. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.